And I think a lot of the times, right, people think of slavery or human trafficking and they think instantly their mind goes to a third world country, failing infrastructure, full of poverty, and that's where slavery and trafficking happens.
Yeah.
But the reality is we have it right here on our doorstep in the UK, right? So vulnerability is the common denominator between all victims.
My mum actually gave me sex education and rape training.
Yeah, wow.
My mum was so specific. I wasn't even 10. And she sat me down and she was like, you see how hard I work? And I'm in a position because of the lack of dad that you have that I can't be with you all the time, but I want you to still have these activities, after school activities, right? And she was like, let's be honest, you're thin. You're in comparison to a man, you're weak. So if you're in a situation where you're touched in the wrong place, if someone touched your private, this is what you do. Bienvenido mi gente, this is Francisco Gomez and welcome to the Progressing Male. Here with my co-host, we are trying to tackle cancel culture. Don't cancel us, let us know what you feel so we can learn and be educated. Hopefully through this process we talk about some of the stuff that you try to avoid. We're going to tackle it head on with no judgment and definitely no arguments. So if you're watching this on YouTube or maybe IG or wherever you may be hearing or watching this, please sound off in the comments below because we want you to join in the conversation. Now you know the drill by now, and if not, welcome. If this is your first episode, I am always joined by my two pillars. I have 𝘧𝗿𝗏𝘍𝗏𝘀𝘀😍
Yoda.
And then we have my favorite ginger, 𝘭𝘍𝗏𝘀𝘀🐬. Both very extremely talented. Today we're going to talk about a topic, boys, that I don't think you're ever going to think of.
Right.
Sex trafficking or being trafficked.
Wow.
In general. I think it's important in our society because I've heard about it so much. Just what are the telltale signs and how to identify it and the origins of this, because to me it's an art form. It's an organised, disgusting art form. So we've got Mikey Frome from an organisation called A21, and he is the country manager, which is very big and esteemed. Cool. And your ethos is you're trying to abolish any type of slavery. Yeah,
so abolish slavery everywhere, forever. Big old mission statement.
But you know what's funny, Mikey? Welcome, by the way. Thanks, that the word slavery, you really think that shackle type of terminology is done.
Yeah, it's so not.
We are so wrong. So let us know about the organisation and ease us in chronological order what you actually do.
Yeah, well, dope to be here. Good to be with you guys. Bringing the energy. But yeah, so human trafficking is one of the fastest growing organised crimes on the planet, right? So we are an anti-human trafficking organisation. So we stand to fight what that looks like in different countries and different continents and contexts. So every country, it looks different, right? And you just mentioned the word slavery. People think that's an old term that's been abolished or it's gone away with. But the reality is it's modern day slavery. So it looks totally different than our pre-notion. So a lot of people would think like slavery, someone's chained up in a marketplace being sold. The reality is that isn't happening here in the UK. But there are different forms that people are being exploited and enslaved, sold online, sold in different locations.
Like actual bodies being sold.
Bodies becoming commodities. So the same way that we would buy a hat or buy a t-shirt and use it, people are being sold just like that.
I can't believe that.
Yeah, man.
So I think this is an important episode because if I'm not mistaken, statistically, it's the younger people that this happens to most, right?
Well, massively. Well, all over the world, but if we talk UK. Young people, this has happened to loads. So the beauty of social media, right, is that it gives people this world that they could never access before. And you get knowledge, you get information, you get amazing things just like this podcast. But unfortunately, traffickers, you said it's organised crime, right? So traffickers are using it as a way that they can exploit people. So they're looking for people online, false job opportunities. All of us come from like a performing arts industry, right?
Yep.
So offering these amazing contracts to people, but the reality is when they get to said destination, whatever it may be, that contract is not real.
They're stuck there.
Exactly, and they're
I've
being
heard
trafficked.
about these things.
In Dubai, it's happening a lot recently, and it's on the news.
In Dubai?
Yeah, so stuff like this is happening all over the world. That's just something that's coming. People are come to Dubai, you're going to get X, Y, and Z contract, and they get there. Passports are being taken. People are being manipulated, coerced into doing X, Y, and Z, whatever it may be. Different forms.
Okay, so that's horrible, by the way. I can't believe that is modern day slavery still a thing for us.
Yeah.
It's a very sophisticated operation because there's I think there's steps to this, right? I think it'll probably start with manipulation with the person and then entrapping them. How does that, obviously because you probably get case upon case, what's the similarities that you see that happens? How do these men or women or girls or boys get actually in these situations?
Yeah, I think it's something we can all relate with, right? It's vulnerability. And I think a lot of the times, right, people think of slavery or human trafficking and they think instantly their mind goes to a third world country, failing infrastructure, full of poverty, and that's where slavery and trafficking happens.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But the reality is we have it right here on our doorstep in the UK, right? So vulnerability is the common denominator between all victims of human
So they
trafficking.
scout a person who's vulnerable, weak.
And there are many things that can make someone vulnerable. Let's just be real, right? So during the COVID times, we were all isolated on lockdown in our house. I definitely felt more vulnerable than ever. I was alone, I was isolated. I'm a people person, right? So I didn't feel like the Mikey I always am. People, their jobs, let's talk about the industry for a second, right? The whole industry was pretty much shut down, ground to a halt. So people are desperate and again becoming vulnerable. So this is organised crime. Traffickers are saying, how can we look for people to recruit, build this rapport, and then look to exploit them? And it does start really in a trivial way. So let's use like Instagram, a little DM, someone, it's not a catfish, it's someone who poses to be like a job recruiter. This person will give them a call, they'll build a rapport with them, start to get to know them, and through those conversations look for those little weak points. This is organised crime, remember? And as they find those weak points, that is their leverage almost, that they can look to try and exploit someone into whatever the scenario may be. And this is not only just through social media, it's online gaming. We see it happen that with young people playing games like Fortnite. Have you guys played that?
I don't, but my sons do.
Yeah.
My sons do.
Right, so this is a case study of a real thing that happened in the UK. Young boy, he's gaming online. Someone's chatting to him and it's an interactive game. And someone says, hey, if you do a roly-poly in front of your camera, I'm going to give you 10 extra lives. This young kid, he's a young boy, like 10, 12 years old. He's like, awesome. Yeah, of course I'm going to do that. Does the roly-poly, gets 10 lives. It progresses in a really small way. Hey, if you do a roly-poly or a cartwheel in front of your camera, but take your t-shirt off this time, I'll give you 20 lives. He's like, yeah, awesome. Doesn't sound crazy. It's just taking my t-shirt off. And it progresses and progresses and progresses until this person on the other side of the screen is saying, bring your young sister into the room because I have this image of you. I have you doing this, you saying this. If you don't bring your sister into the room and do this, then these are going to be the repercussions. I'm going to show your school. I'm going to tell your family.
Wow.
Puts all this pressure on this kid from that small little bit of vulnerability. Blackmails him, coerces the person. And unfortunately, in this story, the young, let's just be real with each other. Like, the young kid took his own life. And that was the catalyst for the police to investigate and say, what's happened here? They found out it was human trafficking through an online gaming. And that person was trafficking hundreds of kids across the UK. So on our doorstep. Not in a third world, poverty-stricken country, in the UK on our doorstep.
Wow.
That is horrendous. And when I was doing my research, if I'm not mistaken, the statistics show that boys are trafficked more in this country.
We'll see a lot of guys. So, boys and men are actually trafficked the most in a thing called forced labour. So, working in agriculture, car washes, even nail bars, and so forth.
Oh, so it's not sexual.
It's not. No, exactly. Yeah.
Oh, there's there's levels to this shit. Unfortunately,
Of course, that's what he's saying. This is the wow.
Because my brain went straight to sexual. Because when you said in X, Y, and Z, I was like, well, I can imagine what one of those is, but what are the other? Yeah. Plus the Y and Z.
So, Mikey, that's a great point, Mikey. I'm sorry, Kane. So, Mikey, let me know what are the types of trafficking? Like, there's sexual labour.
Yeah. So main form of trafficking we see in the UK is forced labour. So someone working, as I mentioned, in agriculture, car washes. Could be on picking strawberries, whatever it may be. Then you've got sexual exploitation, which does happen to boys and women and girls and all ages. Sexual exploitation. You have things like domestic servitude, which is household servants. Now, obviously, there's a legal aspect to the sense people can have a household servant in the UK, but the illegal side is people are being brought in or moved from one part of the country to another to work in these massive houses in some of the most prestigious parts of London. They're forced to work all day and night. They have horrible living conditions, like in the basement on a mattress, bucket for a toilet, and they're behind closed doors. So a lot of the times, this domestic servant is subject to physical abuse, obviously a lot of mental abuse, and a lot of sexual abuse because it's behind closed doors. It's not like someone in a nail bar or a car wash that you're going to look at. When you go to a car wash, you're going to see that person face to face, and if there's a bruise or a big cut, that's going to be a red flag for you. So traffickers, they know this, so they say, okay, we're not going to physically abuse that person as much, we're going to obviously mentally manipulate. But domestic servitude is another one. Another one that we see a lot is organ harvesting. So people's organs being taken out. Yeah.
Okay, where's my camera? I've been telling people about this all along, and people be looking at me like it's crazy. Shit is real.
Yeah, absolutely.
That is...
Can you explain that for me?
Yeah. So essentially what it is, it's people being promised that, let's say, an organ to be removed and they're going to get money for it. The organ can be sold on like the black market, let's say.
Yes.
But most of the time, and again, why would someone do that? vulnerability. They're absolutely desperate
for money.
No one's going to do that to think, I'm just going to do it because it's awesome. They're going to think, I need money. I'm so desperate. And traffickers, they prey on that. So then they look for the people who are in desperate situations and say, you know, sell your kidney, for instance, and you'll get X amount of money for it. They put them under their stake. They take the organ, and they actually would never give that person the money. A lot of times it's a bodge job. It's not in a professional clinic or anything like we would be used to. Yeah, so it's absolutely harrowing. And you know, we have heard stories, unfortunately, where people take other things that are unpromised, procedures that don't need to happen, things are being taken from these victims. So organ harvesting is another one. So there's just a few on the board there, and there's some of like the main ones we see. So, and then that online exploitation, that's another one
that
we just spoke about. That one's crazy.
In the era of catfishing, that's a lot, isn't it?
You know, with the whole catfish premise, this is what's not. I like that we're just jumping straight into it, right?
Yeah, of course.
But like you mentioned, you had kids.
Yeah.
So this is the thing with this whole catfish premise, and we always say like safeguard, protect yourself online, and we need to do it too as adults. We need to make sure like who we're talking to is correct and X, Y, and Z. But traffickers, organised crime, they're not using like decoys. So when they've got a young guy who's looking to talk to a young girl and start a false relationship, or vice versa, it's not an old 50-year-old man. It's actually a young guy that trafficker has recruited, manipulated, and employed to start false relationships with 10 young girls. So when they do FaceTime, he is that guy. He's good looking, he's charming, he's funny, he treats her nicely. But what he does slowly but surely, he builds the trust, builds the rapport, looks for the vulnerabilities, exploits the vulnerabilities. And once that girl, let's say in this false scenario, is what is called broken in. So he says, for instance, like, you know, if you loved me, I've given you all this money, I've helped you. If you love me, you'd sleep with this person just once for me. I'm desperate and you'd help me. Once that girl does that, she is broken in. The trafficker will then take her into a trafficking ring as such. And that young boy will just go start the next false relationship. And we've seen that happen for over 4 years, the grooming process.
So he's just kind of the middleman.
Exactly.
To seek these vulnerable girls or boys, seal the deal. So once they do the deed, they then become pimped out, basically. Exactly and then they start exactly the same process of
exactly
an alcohol.
Yeah. And that was all, like, that whole scenario can happen from your comfort of your own home on your phone.
And then, like, so, you know, like, the young boy who's doing it, would he be, like, is he working for them as in, like, working, getting paid, or is he being exploited to get to the position that he's in?
Bit of both, isn't it?
Yeah, case, I guess.
Case by case.
Exactly that, yeah.
Can I ask you a question? Because maybe when you look at these cases, you might get similarities, but I like to try as much as you can to put yourself in the situation, just to understand the scope. I'm vulnerable, I'm young, I don't know any better, life's dealt me certain cards. I'm in that situation right now. But a lot of these, some, correct me if I'm wrong, they still living at home.
Yeah.
To an extent. So at one point, is it purely fear that can't break the chain? Because if my body's being exploited and I know that's wrong, and I'm being pimped out physically, let's say, all I have to say is no.
Yeah.
And then tell either my parents, let's say I don't have the parents because some come from broken homes.
Yeah.
I just go to the police because I've got enough proof. Why isn't that psychological barrier broken quicker? Or is it that they've manipulated them so well that they're just stuck?
Yeah, absolutely.
My goodness, and that's something I cannot fathom. Poor minds.
Yeah, and it's that tragic thing, isn't it? It's like when someone is sexually abused in whatever it may be. Let's say, you know, by a family member, and they don't tell their family for so long because for some reason they feel shame. Like, we can't understand that because obviously the psychology of us is not in that situation. But it's the same thing. I heard a story of a girl, she was 13, and a neighbour basically started to exploit her and then trafficked her and so forth. And she couldn't tell her family because she was like, the shame it would bring on my family. And she was like, and culturally, that's not a thing, sex before marriage. She was like, so I would actually just be discarded from my family and kicked out. So that was her like war. And it's so sad. It is. Because like her war is, there's no justice for her in either scenario. So it's
a lose-lose.
Yeah, so it's so hard for her. And I think, like, you know, we hear all these stories and it is so common. But like we've all just said, here's the reality. I've been working for A21 for 6 years now, right?
Okay.
Let's say probably 8 years ago I heard about the issue, and that's where I wanted to like do something. And I didn't just go start working for A21. I was in the industry just sharing my knowledge of it. But people who hear about this crime, it is, and myself included, sexual exploitation, women, let's say Eastern European. That's all I used to think about.
Yeah, you just don't. Why is it related only?
Because that's all we saw.
That's all it used to be.
And that's what we're sold in films.
Yeah.
So like if we think of what's the one with the
Taken.
like that's what my brain goes to straight away is that That's where the daughter goes right to a trafficking
That's
house.
our example.
Yeah, but that's what we're.
It's crazy that that's our example.
But that's why this is important. Do you know what I mean? Just having like a real open space where we can talk about it and say like, what are the other forms? I don't know, you know?
Yeah.
And for myself and what we do, we're experts in the field, but this is an evolving crime. Every day it evolves, so we're trying to learn.
Because it gets more sophisticated.
It really does.
Or it's at a stage of such sophistication that it's really difficult to detect. Because how I came across this subject, and you know, I'm a person that respects all type of information, and it's up to me to, you know, to basically investigate what's BS and what isn't. And a lot of people in government positions or positions of power, let's say the 1%, a lot of these kids go missing because they're undocumented from like neighboring countries in America or third world countries, and they're pimped out or sacrificed. And it sounds so crazy and so bizarre when you get into it, and you're like, no, the statistics match these stories. Where are these kids? You know what I mean? And it happens from orphanages, the parents are promised X amount of money just to borrow their kids for either a photo shoot, whatever. They never get the kids back. And it's just like, this stuff really is happening. Because also I knew someone loosely who dabbled in the dark web, but his wasn't harvesting or nothing like that, but I think it was equipment for him. And he was like, Cisco, if you only knew this stuff, there are literally code names for body parts, and depending on the blood type as well, depends on the price. And they're like, people are so desperate for money in these places, they're like, oh well, I've got 2 kidneys, I can lose one, and then they end up having less body parts left of a botched job, and then the police in those countries can't do nothing because there's no proof, or they're in it and they've been tipped off too. It
is. It's a hard crime, you know. I mean, because
it's heartless.
Do you know why it is so hard? I'd say as well is like you just referred to it there as like you can't bag up a human being and say like you stay there as evidence until a trial happens. That's a human being. So, I mean, it's not like a murder weapon, let's say. So, like, you're dealing with a person who's dealing with severe trauma as well.
Yes.
Who then, when the trial does come, they're obviously going through all this trauma. And even the reality of, like, imagine for us, the person who's done the worst thing to us in our lives, and it wouldn't be as, hopefully not as severe, I don't know everyone's stories, but as trafficking. But, like, having to sit across from that person. That's so harrowing, so scary. So, a lot of these victims are like, they don't even want to be in that situation.
Space,
So, they're like, I don't want to go to court. Like,
I don't want to relive it almost.
Exactly. And I respect how brave it is too, and I respect how brave it is not to as well. So that's another thing when it actually comes to identifying the perpetrators, how it makes it difficult.
So before I get into the how-to guide to detect these sickos, Dwayne, I want to extend a question to you, because obviously the relationship you have with the dynamics you have with your children is obviously very strong and it's very healthy. But hearing stuff like that, and you know your son or sons play that game, what does that do to your mind?
I was actually going to ask. I was like, how? Because for us, obviously, it's only so far. We think about those things, like you said, we protect to a degree, but I'm not even thinking that far. If you understand, I'm not thinking. I'm obviously aware that it could go that far, but I'm thinking just at the surface. I'm thinking like, I just don't want you speaking to people you don't know.
Right.
Which could then get to that stage. But I'm also thinking what Cisco said. I'm hoping my sons, because I got twin boys. My daughter doesn't play on the consoles and that like that, but my boys do. They're on it hard. They only talk to their friends, which is fine. But my thing is, I would think that my sons would know. Like Cisco said, that if someone said, take off your top or blah, 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 but it's small, that they would know. Even if they said, I'm going to get your other brother in, they'd come straight to dad or mum and say, listen, this is happening. Good. I would think that. But just based on how you said it, because these people, they know how to prey on your mind like that. They actually know how to look out for those vulnerabilities, as you said. So if they're speaking to someone like my sons, it's like they're trying to pick apart that
and break that bond with you, almost
so it's like even small things, me saying come off, they'll be like, oh look, your dad's telling you to come off, but you know, just small things that they could be trying to, do you know what I mean, create space between me and my boys, and create some sort of like, I don't know, just
like a divider.
You're right.
So question, Mikey, so you know, hearing his background, like it was vague, but you know, what I'm hearing, Dwayne, is that you would hope that your sons know that to detect that that's unusual, come to dad. What would you recommend though? Because obviously you've seen probably cases similar to that. and that's not worst case scenario yet.
Yeah.
So what would you, if you didn't know Dwayne personally and you heard the similarities, what would be recommendations or suggestions for a father?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, just as resource-wise goes, like we have loads of free resource on our website,
right?
For like parents guides for parents to talk to their kids about human trafficking, teens guides, kids to talk about to kids, just to make it like less taboo. And that would be my like first bit of advice. Like, let's not make the subject taboo for a kid. Like, let's actually sit down and have the conversation.
That's true.
I think that is establishing baseline.
Yeah.
And you have it already with your children.
Yeah.
But it's probably an unspoken like, this is our baseline. They know they can always come to dad, which is dope. But I think having the conversation like, hey, and these guides help basically facilitate the conversation without making them feel super fearful and scared. Number one, if something has ever happened to say it, or number two, to ever go online again. We don't want that. But just establish that baseline and utilize the conversation. Yeah. So they understand that this is realities of what does happen and can happen. This isn't just like mummy or daddy or best friend or whatever it may be, godparents, uncles. This isn't us being overprotective or trying to control your situation.
Right.
We're just trying to say like, this is the reality of what's out there and things have happened.
Yeah.
But let's focus on this communication piece, like you just said. So establish that baseline, build that rapport, and make it not taboo. The subject of human trafficking doesn't need to be taboo. I mean, we spoke about some intense parts, I know, but this conversation we could have with a young person in a diluted aspect. And
I get that.
This is the reality. Let's protect you. Let's protect our family. Let's protect us.
Which I believe we do.
Yeah,
because like
it's good. Yeah, sorry.
When I was in school, like we were always taught like stranger danger.
Yeah, right.
Do you know what I mean? Like, don't talk to a stranger.
Yeah.
But never have I ever heard it be spoke about. And I don't know because I'm not in school now, but like about online, like because we, but also because we come across strangers every time we go on our phone. Like there's a new person on Instagram which somehow comes on your feed or likes you.
Grow up in doing that, you know.
Yeah, whereas like
chat rooms were a thing, but it was like hee hee ha ha. You know what I mean?
Yeah, whereas now it's like communicating with the stranger online is so normal. Totally. It's so normalized. So how do you draw the line of knowing what's right and what's wrong? Like who's a good stranger, who's a bad stranger? Because they're all good at first, right?
You know what's so funny, Kane? I love you said that because as Dwayne and you were speaking, what resonated with me, and some of my listeners and followers, you might not know this if you didn't watch season 1, but my mum actually gave me sex education and rape training.
Yeah, wow.
My mum was so specific. I wasn't even 10, and she sat me down and she was like, you see how hard I work, and I'm in a position because of the lack of dad that you have that I can't be with you all the time, but I want you to still have these activities, after school activities, right? And she was like, let's be honest, you're thin, you're in comparison to a man, you're weak. So if you're in a situation where you're touched in the wrong place, if someone touched your private, this is what you do. If someone shows you their stuff or like harnesses you, you do this. And I remember my mum said to me, and I'll never forget this, she's like, if it gets to the point where he's stripping you off and he's going to rape you, submit to it, and almost like have a change of character, almost like you're like, oh, I actually want this. And she's like, it sounds crazy, but that sicko is gonna love the change of character from the adrenaline of like doing it to like you submitting, because that's what it is. It's a power thing. And he's like, become the little sex slave he wants. And then when you play with his ding dong, my mum used to call it a pee-pee, when you play with his pee-pee, you touching it is going to get reactive, and you're going to have to create a split screen. Get that as hard as you can, look him up in the eyes, but when you go to suck it, make sure it leaves in your mouth.
Damn.
He's like, you're going to bite so hard, Cisco, and your top teeth need to meet your bottom teeth. And then as he pushes you, you also push his thighs. And what will happen is it'll rip something. But you bite, Cisco, you bite, and don't you dare leave without the other half.
That
and I remember going to my mum.
Specific.
No, specific. And I remember going to my mum, I was like, huh. And then the first time I experienced a sexual predator, I could identify it. He never touched me, but he would look at me while I was with my mum like he wanted to do disgusting things to me. And I just remember
you detected it.
I had a choreographed option because he was so creepy. And then when I got older, because I met him when I was like 11 or 12, and then come 15, 16, he's starting to see me by myself. And I could feel him lurking and just undressing me with his eyes. And I was like, thank fuck that my mum prepped me, because I'm not going down.
Yeah, right.
Like, I'm leaving with your pee-pee, or I'm leaving you to the point where I have to wait for the police and be like, I did that.
Yeah, right.
And so, obviously, that's an extreme way of introducing it, but my mum was so black and white, and so, as we say in London, raggo with everything. Just so upfront and clear, because she's like, I can't control the outside, but what you can control is what happens when the outside comes to you.
Yeah.
Because you're not going to come home broken, confused, or like you were, you know, heaven forbid, raped.
Right.
I'm prepping you for everything because I can't be with you.
Wow.
Yeah. And so that knowing, like, hearing this, what echoed, I said, thanks, mum. Thanks, mum. Because even that young, when I know I'm being manipulated and I'm sure I can be taken to a space that's not safe, I knew I had that database. I was like, my mum's trained me for this, so now it's time, because I've been taught that's wrong or that's unacceptable. So I think the moral of the story would be is, like, depending on what personality and age the child is, just make any subject when it comes to sex or manipulation or, you know, not taboo, but also something that's normal. So when your kids are saying, oh, this happened in school, or da-da-da, you can be like, let's go back to that. You do know that's not okay, or that's wrong.
Sure.
So no subject is the wrong subject. Because when these things happen, shame is always at the
huge.
forefront.
Yeah, so you actually make a really good point there, and you speak about that, like, the journey of, let's say, and you were speaking, referring to coming out, like, and that's that social anxiety, that pressure, and then that shame, it is, you know, that must be very common when someone's been abused, that they go, I've got all this shame, I've got all this social pressure, I don't want to be tarred with this brush.
Yeah.
And we actually see that, you know, with a lot of victims, unfortunately, they almost don't even want to admit that they are a victim of human trafficking.
They don't, and some block it out.
Yeah, because they feel it's a shame on their life, and they don't want to be tarred forever.
When you think about it, who would?
Yeah, exactly.
So you understand that, but then,
I'm also going to take the shame on your behalf, whoever did it for me. Isn't that bizarre?
Because of the taboo, though, I guess.
Yeah.
Because we're not talking about it.
Yeah, and it's like, they must feel, and I can't say I know this for a fact, but they must feel like everyone knows by just looking at them. Do you know what I mean? It's that thing, but that is so true.
Yeah,
that one, sad, you know.
Well, you know, this is true, because when you're gay, or when you come out of the closet, you think a bloody tree's calling you a 𝗣𝗿 man or gay.
Right.
Like, honestly, I would look at plants and be like, is there someone behind there?
You think it's kind of printed on your forehead, isn't it?
It's crazy, and you're like, you come out and you're like, yes, I did it, and then you're like, what are you staring at? Or like, what the little bugs like, and you're like, what are you looking at?
I watched a documentary, Pamela Anderson documentary.
Okay.
Yeah, just giving a quick shout out, innit? But I watched it the other day, and she actually spoke about that. She was, I think, abused by someone, I think, at 12, or 14 or something. Anyway, she was young, but she just felt like, it was like the person was older than her, like about 20 odd, but it was an older student, whatever. And when she came out, she just felt like it was tattooed on her forehead that I've had sex. And she felt like everyone could see it. So when she did what she did, like Playboy and all those things, it was her getting her power back.
Totally.
That's like, for her, it was like being naked in that way. I was controlling this.
That's like, have you seen the documentary on Netflix? And it's about like ex-porn stars.
Yeah.
And it tells, like, they do like a, how did you get into this? And most of them were abused as a child.
Yeah, and they're reclaiming their power.
And this is them, like, sex to them or anything doesn't have an emotional attachment,
right?
Because it was a negative thing. So now they've just used it to their advantage, where they don't. It's so numb because they don't enjoy it.
Because before there was probably a lot of shame attached to it.
Is there a? Do you see a theme with people who are the vulnerable people, that they've already had trauma in their life before they get to this?
Yeah, I mean, like not all the time, like trauma of they were abused already, but like the trauma.
But even like a dysfunctional family, like their parents have just separated, or they're a single mum,
the trauma
or
of we live in severe poverty, like every single day, like it's hand to mouth. Do you know what I mean? So yeah, I think like, I mean, I'd like merge up with that vulnerability thing, but absolutely it's that thing. But it's not always the case. You do have stories of people that are living
like the perfect life in a
perfect life,
picket fence. Like
we all long for things in life, you know what I mean? Yeah. So then, like,
and that's what they look for.
Exactly. They look.
It doesn't matter what walk of life.
Yeah.
Those ones are just easier.
Yeah.
Professional vulnerable seekers.
Yeah, but they can see it. They can sense it. It's like being able to be like, oh, Cisco, boom, I can work this out. Like which kind of vulnerability you have, especially when I do it so much.
Yeah,
exactly.
So, you know what I mean?
It's even like, this sounds so ridiculous to say, but people who have like extreme wealth, they trust no one. They actually probably feel like they've got no close people to their lives, because that person who wants me for this, that person wants me for that. So if a trafficker can exploit that, they're going to look to exploit that.
They will.
So I think vulnerability isn't just a matter of like it's like when we say trafficking, women, sex trafficking.
Sex, yeah, and it's not that.
When we speak about vulnerability, like there are so many things that can make people vulnerable.
Yep.
I think we have to understand and come from that viewpoint.
Right.
And say like, just because your vulnerability is different to mine doesn't mean we're both not vulnerable in different ways.
Amen.
I like that.
Very true.
So yeah.
So true. Mikey, so I want to end the episode by what are things that we could kind of suss out to be like if we're in a store or if we're in a supermarket and we're like, aha, that's a sign. What's the telltale sign? So maybe we, as a society, we can be more acute and aware of it.
Yeah, and that is it. Like that is this whole conversation. We spoke a lot about the issue of, because you can't sugarcoat it. You have to tell people the reality. But it's all about awareness. Awareness that leads to action brings change, right?
Yes.
And it changes the game. It stops young people from being vulnerable. It stops us from being vulnerable. We help our community. So I'm going to give you two quick stories. One story is this. I was walking through Victoria Station, central London, a couple years ago, and this guy's like following me a little bit. So I'm like, I turn around, I'm quite a nice person, aren't I? No, I'll try and be.
One of the nicest.
So I just say to him, like, oh, hey, man, you good? Do you need help or something? He says, oh, yeah, can you help me? And he gets like an old like Nokia 3310 vibes out his pocket, right? This was a couple years back. He's like, can you fix my phone? So I'm like, I'll try. So as I'm trying to like piece his phone together, I'm just small talking with him. I say, like, what's your name? He tells me his name. I say, where are you from? He says, I'm from Bulgaria. I'm like, oh, cool. Like, I have friends there, A21. We have offices there. So I'm like, what are you doing in the UK? He says, I've got my dream job here. I'm like, yes. I'm like, cheerleader. Like, if you're winning in life, I'm winning with you, right? So I'm legit, before COVID, patting this guy on the back. I'm like, yes, well done, mate. That's amazing. And he just says, no. So I like stop patting him on the back. I'm like, you okay? What do you mean by no? He said, when I got to the UK, it wasn't what they promised. And he told me he was promised to come over here and become a teacher of carpentry. He said the day I got here, they took my passport, took me to a car wash and forced me to wash cars all day and all night. He said no food, he had no pay, he was physically abused, mentally abused. His family's lives were threatened. And it wasn't just, we'll kill your family. It was, this is your family's address, this is your mum's name, your dad's name, your little brother's name. Will affect your family. It's organised crime.
To a grown-ass man.
To a grown man. He was sleeping in a shipping container with all the chemicals and did not leave that car wash.
Look at God. If you don't believe in God, but look at the universe.
That's the reality of it.
That he
out of all people, that station, Victoria Station, is so busy.
Massive.
Boom, bumps into me.
But that is the power.
And I said to him, there is no shame in what has happened to you, right? He escaped that car wash that day. I said, there's no shame in what's happened to you. You're not a victim. You're a survivor of human trafficking. We called the police because it was a direct emergency, and we were able to assist this guy to go home, be safe in his own surroundings.
I've got goosebumps.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Because and I tell you that story because I want to show you guys how amazing I am. Right? I tell you this story because I want to show you guys this. I want to show you how good
I weren't
awareness
expecting
is.
My friend's back. There he is.
No, how good awareness is.
Yeah.
Right.
That could have been anyone who's listening to this conversation right now in that station, and they could go ... connect. This guy's a victim of human trafficking. Call the police, and I'll tell you the modern slavery helpline number and stuff later. But I tell you it because I want to show us how awareness can lead to action and can bring change to somebody's life. Now that's an extreme scenario, but the small scenario is just like calling and reporting. I could tell you a million stories. So I don't know if we've got time, but like a million stories of just calling, making a small report. You add your little piece to the jigsaw puzzle, and sometimes it could be the final piece, sometimes it could be the first piece, but it all adds up to helping somebody become free out of a current situation of modern slavery. So how do we identify human trafficking? What do we look for? And I think maybe the best way is just to leave you with this. So the police raided like nail bars all over the UK a couple of years ago, and they found many victims of human trafficking.
There's one in Swindon where I live.
Yeah,
They did the bottom of Swindon.
Where you live, right?
Yeah, got closed down.
It is on our doorstep. It's hidden in plain sight. It's right in front of us. And they raid all these nail bars, and they get to interview one girl while she's in the nail bar, and she's not a victim of human trafficking, she's just a customer. So they said to her, did you ever suspect or expect there to be slaves in this nail bar? And this girl was like mind blown, obviously. The police have just barged in and all that. She's mind blown, and she says, I can't believe it. Like, I come here like every month, every couple of months or whatever, and I get my nails done. I've never thought about it. So the police, they asked this girl a question, and everything that I'm going to talk about, it's transferable. They said, did you ever speak to the person who does your nails? She's like, no. She's like, we just point at things, actually. There's never a conversation. She never even asked me how my day is. That's a weird thing in the UK. If you ask me, everyone's like, how are you? Even if they're not listening to the response we ask. We have no conversation. We just point. That's a small indicator. If you're in a situation, whatever it may be, and someone doesn't speak to you, That's a small indicator.
They're told not to.
Exactly.
Bitch.
Yeah, and I'm gonna carry on.
I'm going to every nail shop, bitch. I'm getting you all.
Yeah. So that's one thing. Then the police officer said to her, okay, how do you pay to get your nails done? She says cash. Cash only doesn't mean trafficking. There are cash only in lots of places, but it can be unaudited money. So they said, okay, do you pay the girl who does your nails? And this young girl, she says, no, there's actually a woman who comes and she takes the money. And this young girl was like, she takes all the money and we have no conversation or any communication with this young girl. Another indicator is there someone in that workplace domineering, controlling. Then they say to this, did she have the correct protective gear? No, not one thing. Not one mask, goggles, nothing. So she has no protective gear. Then the last thing they said to this young girl, they said, is it the same girl who does your nails every single month when you come here? And she says, no. She said, people will come and go from this place all the time. She even referenced a young boy she saw, who she said was around the age of 8 years old. She saw him for about 2 months and he just disappeared off the face of the earth. So she mentions those things and the police officer's like, did you suspect that? And she says, I've never thought about this. And they said, what about the lady who is domineering and taking the money? She says, she controls this place. It's almost like these people are
her property.
Penny drops. She in that moment, she realizes, oh my gosh, I have seen all these indicators that we've just reeled off a bunch of, but you know what she never did? Spoke about it. Just never had a conversation like this. So that's why I love saying, I love this kind of stuff, and I love just saying, go home and tell your friends about it. Use your social media, start talking about it. Like, use what we can to create awareness. Because you don't have to come on, I love A21, but you don't have to come work for A21 to make a difference, right? You can literally, like you guys are doing with this podcast, use your sphere of influence and your voice to make a difference.
Oh, I'm going to be the Batman of nail salons
now.
Straight up.
This man said, I'm Batman.
Yeah. But I do want to encourage, like, in that situation, if you ever see or suspect something,
what do you do?
Report it. Yeah,
you or the police.
You report it. So if it's a direct emergency, like if you see someone getting physically manhandled or grabbed or whatever, report it to the police. It's direct. But we have a modern slavery helpline number in the UK, which we will 0800121
One more time.
0800121
Yep.
So you can report it. You should report it to that. And I want to encourage people to do it. I think, I grew up in a very British family, right? Traditional. So you don't say anything. You just look at the blinds, you see what people are doing.
Yeah, you mind your business, yeah.
Mind your business, that's all. But I want to encourage people not to do that. I think if you suspect something, just say it. It's anonymous. No one's going to know it's you. But like I said, jigsaw pieces. We're just adding our little pieces to the puzzle. And it can. And I know stories of someone who has made a report. They thought it was nothing. A raid happened and someone got rescued out of. In one of the stories, a young girl got arrested out of sexual exploitation because a neighbour called because she saw one indicator.
Do you know what's wild is, literally listening to you tell this story, all I'm thinking about is my barbershop where I get my haircut. Like where you're like they don't speak very good English. They're always like, I'm going back home soon to Bulgaria. And then a new guy's there a week later. Like, do you know when you'd like, and it's never even crossed my mind once.
We have more information and now we have to do our part because... Honey,
like it's crazy. Like you're like, oh, I've been in these scenarios.
Yeah, and just start having conversations. Obviously, like have conversations. And one thing I will say, disclaimer for everyone: like, don't put yourself in situations. Like, I feel you on the nail bar thing. I was like, that's it. I want to go Liam Neeson on it and like kick the tables over and like rescue people out.
Oh, no,
but
I wouldn't be that voice.
Yeah, I'm not gonna lie. I was gasped when I watched that movie and I like wanted to do that, but I'm like. 1'1" skinny, it's not going to work well. But I encourage people, like, don't step into those situations because you're going to put yourself in a vulnerable situation. And the people that are in that nail bar enslaved, all they're going to do is up and leave that nail bar, move them to another part of the country so that it all falls apart. It is better not to be vigilante. It's much safer for you and the potential victims of trafficking if you report it to
so don't play Batman.
This is a silly question. I'm still going to be Batman, but I'll be very sly. You know when it happened during COVID because domestic violence rose, and there's a hand sign.
Yeah.
Is there something like that? Like, say for example, I'm speaking to someone who's not allowed to speak, and my spirit energy is like, girl, I know what's happening here, and I'm like, I can't say the blink once technique.
Yeah.
But is there something I can be like, bitch, if you give me that sign, say no more. Like, I got you. Is there like a sign?
Not that I'm aware of. No, like not a universal sign.
Like no.
Yeah, no, you can't. You can't
Sorry,
use it overhead or
sorry,
something.
It's not really intense.
No, yeah, not that I know of. Like, there's not a sign, unfortunately. But
well, I'm gonna call it.
We just made one.
Yeah, but it's gonna be like 24/8. Yes, we all know.
That just basically means a lot of moves in one section. Mikey, we are going to have the website and the number on our IG and our YouTube because it's important. I really hope that this episode inspired to just be more aware and also just be more receptive to your surroundings, because obviously if I go to a nail salon, I just want my nails done. But there's more to it. And there could be more mechanics and more nuances, unfortunately, to that situation. And I think now hearing this, I think we can all be a bit more open-eyed and and be able to receive, even though we're there to receive something ourselves. Mikey, thank you so much.
Thank you.
You're amazing.
Seriously, amazing.
So I'm like vexed, inspired, and like disgusted at the same time. Like it's
roller coaster ride of emotions.
Yeah, for real.
Yeah.
I feel that.
My goodness. I have something to say. Guys, keep it real without the spiel.
Done though.
No.